She knows what she wants tonight. Moves fast like a neon tide. Confidence in every line. She's got style to find.
The Package, Chapter 11. The hours passed, each one stretching longer than the last in the silence of the post-EMP world. Inside the playground, Sarah and the team wrestled with the daunting task of unraveling the Exodus pulse. Outside, May's group ventured into a chaotic, unsettling landscape. Within the playground's dimly lit lab, a whirlwind of energy focused on unraveling the Exodus core's mystery. Bobby, having pored over several physics texts from the playground's archives, showed Gemma and Sarah an article from an old research paper. The core's exhaustion after the EMP release may be analogous to a highly tuned instrument vibrating out of sync after a powerful note. The key isn't just power, it's precision, she stated. We need to hit the exact opposite frequency to nullify its effect, or a resonant one to amplify its unpulse. Sarah, her intersect subtly guiding her through the stack of forgotten files and obscure scientific papers, quickly pinpointed one titled Chitauri Harmonic Principles, a highly theoretical field of study. Her mind, racing, connected these principles to the director's seemingly innocuous references to anomalous biological interaction. What if the core's frequency isn't regulated digitally? She hypothesized, sketching rapidly on a whiteboard. What if it interacts with biological energy fields or even latent psionic abilities? Daisy hadn't been focused on scientific principles. She was struggling with the subtle, lingering reverberations in her own body from the core's initial discharge, felt a jolt of recognition. But when Sarah mentioned the biological energy fields, it made her wonder. To her, it felt personal, like it was resonating through her, not just vibrating the ground. Her unique powers, a living embodiment of vibrational energy, made her a crucial, if unwilling, conduit for understanding the core's true nature. She began to experiment, focusing her own minor vibrational output, trying to find a sympathetic resonance with the dormant core. Gemma, Daisy asked, if it uses biological energy fields, would it be something I could feel? Not like the natural vibrations I always feel, but something more, I don't know, controlled? Simmons, meticulously building their analog frequency detector from old radio components and a salvaged oscilloscope, carefully calibrating each resistor and capacitor, stopped and thought. That would make sense if Bobby and Sarah are right. Tell me, did it feel like something with a specific frequency, or were there multiple layers, like a harmony in a song? Daisy frowned, thoughtfully. Yes, like a song, but there was definitely a single undertone that controlled the rest of the notes. Well, if you can give us a baseline, a precise feel for this resonant frequency, we can build a device to measure it. Then the challenge becomes generating an opposing frequency powerful enough to counteract it. Their first major discovery was the complex, layered nature of the EMP's frequency, indicating it wasn't a single blast, but a multi-band attack designed to hit various electronic systems simultaneously. This will make a simple off switch incredibly difficult, Simmons stated. Out in the quiet, shattered world, May's team encountered a chilling landscape. The initial shock of the EMP was giving way to a more insidious chaos. Traffic lights were dead, causing gridlock in abandoned vehicles. Gas stations were useless. Food and water were becoming scarce. The first signs of desperation and opportunism were emerging. They saw frightened families huddled together, looters breaking into stores, and more disturbingly, small groups of heavily armed men, Not centipede, but well-organized, taking advantage of the power vacuum. Their first target was Senator Albright's sprawling, isolated estate. They approached on foot after abandoning their SUV when its fuel ran dangerously low. As they infiltrated the perimeter, Fitz, using his improvised acoustic amplifier, picked up faint, rhythmic sounds. "Engines," he whispered, his voice tight. "Diesel generators, and a lot of activity, more than just a residence." They moved like shadows through the overgrown gardens. What they found was not just a politician's home, but a fortified command center. Diesel trucks, retrofitted with armored plating, were parked discreetly. Men, clearly centipede operatives, moved with purpose, some carrying weapons, others communicating with hand signals. Casey, using a set of antique binoculars, focused on the main house. "Albright's here. And Lynn. They're setting up a communication playground. Old-fashioned radio antennas, but big ones. And a satellite dish, hardened against EMP, probably." Hunter, meanwhile, recognized faces among the centipede guards from his deep cover work. "That's Marcus. He runs Centipede's logistics. They're moving a lot of supplies through here. And not just food and water." He pointed to several large unmarked crates being offloaded from a truck. "Looks like weapons and specialized equipment. They're establishing a new supply chain for their post-EMP world." Their most disturbing discovery came from Natasha. Using her unparalleled infiltration skills, she managed to slip close enough to overhear a conversation between Albright and Wraith, the centipede operative who had pursued Sarah. She heard Wraith say that Phase 2 was on schedule and a distribution network for the stabilization zones was being set up. Stabilization zones? May subtly winced, horrified, when Natasha relayed the words. Natasha nodded. "They're not just taking power. They're offering a new kind of power. Security. Resources. In exchange for loyalty. They're rebuilding society in their own image." This was far more sinister than a simple power grab. As May's team struggled to come to terms with Centipede's plans, Mac and Yo-Yo had to deal with the practical implementation of the plans. One moment, they were a perfectly synchronized symphony of clandestine surveillance, a silent team of spies operating off the grid in the Appalachian vastness. The next, every piece of technology they carried was a dead weight. The satellite phones, the encrypted comms, the long-range scanners, all of it. The silence that followed the EMP was louder than any explosion. Alfonso Mackenzie, his usual steady demeanor fractured by the sudden lack of control, ran a hand over his shaved head. Ilana Rodriguez countered, her voice a tense whisper as she checked her now useless comms one last time. "We have to move, Mac. We need to get to the playground. The team will be trying to regroup there. We can help. We can do something." The team of 5, huddled around the smoking remains of their communication gear, looked to their leaders. Mac was the pragmatic anchor, the one who saw the logic in waiting it out. Yo-Yo was the fire, the one who believed in fighting back and finding a way to contribute. "And what if it's a trap?" Mac challenged, his arms crossed over his chest. "What if the playground has been compromised? We have enough food and water for a few weeks. We can ride this out, figure out what's going on before we walk blindly into a situation we can't handle." "We're spies, Mac. We don't wait. People are going to need help." Yo-Yo's voice rose, her frustration boiling over. The team's medic, a quiet army major named David, spoke up. "With all due respect, Mac, might be right. Even though we can handle whatever is going on, we heard some pretty nasty rumors from the locals on our last pass-through. Whispers of people disappearing. They say Centipede is calling them stabilization zones. If those are real, running out on them is the last thing we should do." The team's technical expert, a laconic man named George, nodded in agreement. "Heard the same thing myself. Folks here are getting spooked. I think we need to stay and help these people. We have the training. We can organize a food and water supply, maybe help with medical." Mac looked at Yo-Yo, his expression pleading for her to see his side. They make a good point. We can help the people here, the ones right in front of us. What do you think? Yo-Yo's eyes softened. She needed to do something, not just sit and wait. She still wanted to get back to S.H.I.E.L.D., fight whoever, whatever had done this, but she could see that people here were in need too. And it reminded her of what she went through in Colombia. Fighting for the people was the right thing to do. Matt could sense the change. After a long look at Elena's face, he continued. We help these people, Max said, the decision settled. We become the anchor here. We deal with the here and now. They descended from the ridge and made their way to the nearest town. The local sheriff, a weary-looking man with a shotgun and a dog, was relieved to find some trained professionals. Over the next few days, Mac's team worked tirelessly, organizing supply runs, establishing a makeshift clinic, and teaching the locals how to fortify their homes. As they worked, a grizzled old man from the town, a former military contractor, approached Mac. You boys looking to get in touch with your people? He asked, a knowing glint in his eye. Used to work at a big SAC radar station way back in the day. It's old school. Didn't run on computers. All tubes and copper. He squinted, pointing vaguely towards the hills. Might still work. That EMP wouldn't have touched it. Inside the S.H.I.E.L.D. cafeteria, dimly lit by emergency lamps and the soft glow of a few CRT displays showing basic power grid diagnostics, Simmons and Bobby Morse took a brief, much-needed break from the intense research. They sat at a corner table, nursing mugs of warm tea, the clinking of their spoons unusually loud in the quiet. Bobby slowly stirred her tea, a quiet sigh escaping her. My brain feels like it's been put through a wringer trying to make sense of these Chitauri schematics without a proper interface. This analog world, Gemma, it's less forgiving. It does present its own unique challenges, doesn't it? But you're making remarkable progress, Bobby, given the circumstances. Bobby nodded, looking into her mug. We all are, I suppose. She paused, looking around the empty room. You know, when Agent Walker first arrived, I did wonder. Simmons' gaze drifted to the steam rising from her mug. You weren't alone. I distinctly recall my initial assessment. A highly capable field agent, undeniably, but her precise contribution to our technical conundrums in the wake of all of this wasn't immediately apparent. Bobby chimed in. Well, Coulson did hint to May and me that both Walker and Casey had been personally vouched for by Fury. Made me wonder what kind of trouble they'd gotten into to warrant that kind of pull. And then a faint, knowing smile touched Simmons' lips. And then she pinpointed that subtle distortion in the atmospheric resonance readings, the one we'd meticulously reviewed for hours, manually cross-referencing every known anomaly. She just observed it in less than a minute. Bobby lowered her voice, a hint of awe in it. Exactly. She immediately noticed the inverted harmonic cascade. Blew my mind, honestly. And then she helped me configure the old vacuum tube processors to model it. My brain still hurts thinking about it. Daisy walked in, rubbing her eyes, heading for the coffee urn, as it sputtered audibly. She grabbed a mug. Morning, you two. Or is it still night? Hard to tell these days, she said as she poured herself some coffee, grimacing slightly at the quality. Is it just me, or does this stuff taste like despair? Simmons chuckled softly. A bit, yes, but it's caffeinated despair. We were just talking about Agent Walker, Bobby added, towards Daisy. Daisy, yeah, she said, taking a thoughtful sip. When Coulson first mentioned bringing in some outside muscle for Centipede, I admit I braced myself for another tough guy, no brains type. No offense to the tough guys, just felt like we had enough of those. And she's so poised, like a statue. Bobby raised an eyebrow, a playful glint in her eye. Careful, Daisy, some of us tough guys are still in the room. Simmons chuckled. then nodded in understanding. Precisely my initial thought. Rather impenetrable. Daisy looked at her coffee, then at them, a small, genuine smile forming. But then you watch her in action. Not just fighting. Hunter made it sound like she's another Captain Marvel or something. She paused. But how she just pieces things together. Like how we were trying to make sense of those old schematic diagrams for the Chitauri power conduits. We had piles of dusty blueprints, magnifying glasses, and she just walked over and pointed to a smudge and said, "Is that the bypass valve you're looking for? It kind of looks like a smudge." And she was right. It probably saved us hours. Bobby nodded. She's certainly proven her capabilities, Daisy. Her insights are, well, remarkable. Daisy took another sip, a slight fondness in her voice. Yeah, she really is. And she doesn't even act like it, which is refreshing. A little intimidating, maybe. But I don't know. She's good. But she doesn't complain about the coffee. I'll hold my judgment on that point, though, she said, as she stared at her cup. She truly is good at her job. For my part, I'm quite relieved she's with us. Her insights have been invaluable. A truly fascinating mind. Bobby finished her tea. Yeah, who'd have thought? Definitely not just another field agent. The playground buzzed with a quiet, grim intensity. The initial shock of the EMP had given way to a steely determination. Coulson pulled Sarah Walker aside, away from the immediate bustle of the command center. He watched her for a moment, observing the way her eyes darted, processing information even when she wasn't actively engaged in a task. "Agent Walker," Coulson began, his voice low and steady. "The intel you gave us was precise. Alarmingly so. And your technical insights, particularly into the core's frequency and the Chitauri principles, are moving at an incredible pace." Sarah met his gaze, a practiced mask of professional competence in place. "I was fortunate to access some very specific data before the Pulse director, and Dr. Shah's notes from Centipede helped piece things together." Coulson nodded slowly. "Indeed. But your ability to connect disparate fragments to synthesize complex theories so rapidly, it's beyond fortunate, Agent. You have a knack for seeing the entire puzzle before anyone else has even found all the pieces." He paused, letting the unspoken implication hang in the air. "I've seen agents with advanced processing capabilities before. They're unique." Sarah felt a flicker of unease. Coulson was too perceptive. She kept her expression neutral. "I've always had a good memory for details, Director. It's an asset in my line of work." Coulson offered a slight, almost imperceptible smile. "A very impressive asset. One that I believe might be able to process certain unique data sets more efficiently than even our best scientific minds." He shifted slightly, his eyes conveying a subtle meaning. "I might have some unconventional resources at my disposal. Information that can only be accessed and interpreted in a very specific way. Information that could hold the key to understanding the full scope of Centipede's operation and perhaps even reversing the EMP." Sarah's mind raced. He had something powerful and secret that survived the EMP. He didn't know about the intersect, but he suspected something. And he was offering a way to collaborate without exposing their full hand. "Access to unconventional resources could accelerate our efforts significantly, Director, especially if they contain non-digital schematics or unique energy signatures." She was fishing, trying to confirm if his resources related to the core. Coulson's smile broadened. "Precisely. Let's call it a legacy archive. It's sensitive. Only certain individuals have ever been cleared for its existence, much less its contents. But it seems our rules of engagement have changed. I believe your knack might be uniquely suited to interpreting its peculiar format." He leaned in slightly, his eyes conveying a subtle meaning. The problem, Agent Walker, is that this archive requires careful handling. It's not something I can simply hand over to the entire technical team. It's also not something that can be directly downloaded or easily replicated in its current state. It needs a specific kind of interaction. Sarah understood. He had data that couldn't be explained by normal means, much like her own ability. He needed her to access it without asking how. It was a perfect, unspoken agreement, a dangerous dance around their mutual secrets. I understand, Director. Sarah confirmed, her gaze unwavering. I'm prepared to handle sensitive information with the utmost discretion. If it helps us stop Centipede, consider it done. Good, Coulson said, a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. We'll work on a secure setup. In the meantime, keep up the excellent work with Simmons and Daisy. Your insights are invaluable. He turned away, leaving Sarah to process the implications. He had the toolbox. She had the intersect. And together, they were about to combine two of the best-kept secrets on the planet, all in a desperate bid to save the world. Meanwhile, in a secure subterranean bunker in an undisclosed location in New York, Nick Fury paced like a big cat at the zoo waiting for feeding time. He had put the pieces in the right places. He'd given just enough information to Coulson, and given the situation after the EMP, his blunt order to allow Walker and Casey to work with his team was easily justifiable. He was waiting for word from the playground, but with no active comms, it could be a long wait. He stopped at his desk and picked up a drink that had been sitting there for hours. He turned the glass in his hand, focusing on the light as it filtered through the facets in the glass. Coulson would follow the plan. That much he knew. Bringing Walker onto the team, that was the crucial part. Coulson would immediately see a prodigy, a brilliant mind that could help them with Centipede. Fury suspected something more. The reports of her unusual processing speed, her photographic memory, and her uncanny ability to connect seemingly unrelated data all kept repeating through his mind. Her abilities were too close to the reports of what Bartowski could do. He'd only given Coulson a partial briefing on his suspicions, just enough to justify the placement, but not so much as to raise a red flag. Coulson was a good agent, but some secrets were better kept from even the most trusted subordinates. The toolbox, a device of his own design, would be a perfect test. He needed to see if his hunch was true. If she could unlock the ultimate archive, she might just be the intersect. He put down the glass without drinking. He could be patient, but this time might be harder than most. Sometime later, in a secluded section of the lab, Coulson and Sarah began their clandestine collaboration. Coulson unlocked the case and, without fanfare, picked up the toolbox, its unassuming exterior belying the vast knowledge it contained. Agent Walker, this is an interface to some high-level information S.H.I.E.L.D. has gathered over decades, Coulson explained. Passing the cube off as an interface rather than the entirety of the toolbox itself would have to do. It's not like reading a file. Think of it as a puzzle. It requires a certain way of thinking, of connecting the seemingly unconnected. Sarah's eyes, fueled by the intersect, scanned the intricate hidden dials, complex interlocking gears, and illuminated symbols of the toolbox. Her mind was already racing, processing the visual information, instinctively understanding the underlying logic. It was alien, yet familiar, like a complex lock designed for a specific kind of key, her mind. As she began to manipulate the dials, the toolbox responded. Faint holographic projections, powered by an internal energy source, flickered to life. These weren't digital displays, but intricate, almost biological patterns of light. Sarah's breath hitched. Her intersect immediately began to synthesize the information, translating the complex light patterns into tangible data. She saw schematics of devices far beyond anything she had seen before, theories on energy manipulation, and, most crucially, a detailed analysis of the Centipede device's energy signature. It's not just a single frequency, she whispered, her eyes wide, with revelation, her voice barely audible. It's a layered harmonic signature,
like a complex musical chord designed to disrupt electronic resonance. Each layer targets a different component within a circuit. The final layer, it's a residual energetic footprint imprinted on all affected electronics. It's not just off, it's been retuned to nullify power. She pulled her hands away, the sheer volume of new information almost overwhelming. The toolbox contains a counter frequency for each layer and a conceptual design for a recalibration pulse generator. It's incredibly complex, but theoretically, it could reverse the EMP. Coulson watched her, a mixture of awe and grim satisfaction on his face. He had limited the revelation of the toolbox, and in doing so, had confirmed Walker's abilities. He paused as the revelation sank in. Fury had not told him everything about her, but then, he never told anyone the whole story, just what he thought they needed to know. With a wide grin on his face, he continued, "Can you translate that for Simmons?" "Not directly," Sarah admitted, "but I can guide her. I can describe the principles, the specific harmonic patterns. It'll be like teaching someone a new language. But now we have the Rosetta Stone." The challenge was immense. Reversing a global EMP was a monumental task, but for the first time, they had a blueprint.
She's got style to find.